All right, we'll start this meeting of the South Burlington School Board with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting, and I will start with comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda. And seeing none, I'll move to amendments. David?
So under item 11, we're going to move 2.1, treatment of parents and staff, parents and guardians, although we want them to all be treated well. That report will move to the next meeting. And we probably ought to have just a short executive session to the end.
Okay.
And that is it.
Any other amendments from the rest of the board? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, end celebration, announcements, and student representative report.
So why don't we do this again? Sue Luck, we're happy to have with us this evening, and this is again the board's desire for a little bit of a kind of a delving into the ends and seeing the ends alive a little bit, and also making connections with some staff, and most importantly the students. So without further ado, I think it's fitting to turn it over to Sue Luck, the principal.
I have the smallest part of all because I have, it's always good to surround yourself with wonderful people, and I've brought wonderful people. The 3 teachers I'll introduce, and I think that the students will introduce themselves, but you all know Jen, and Kristen Corsell, and Anik, who kindly agreed to come and showcase for us. And students, would you like to introduce yourselves now?
I'm Tess Fontana.
And what grade?
I'm in 3rd grade.
Great.
I'm Alder Cochran. I'm in Scoop's class, 5th grade.
I'm Zach Klugo, Mrs. Cooper's class also, 5th grade.
I'm Catherine White. I'm in Mrs. Cooper's class, 5th grade. I'm Leah Angren. I'm in Mrs. Cooper's class and in 5th grade too.
Great. So we're ready to show you a little bit of our ends policy work here at Markov.
Great. So Tess and I are going to start, and we're going to jump right into the Chromebook. She's actually going to introduce herself with a function through the Chromebooks called Read and Write for Google. So the presentation is, I know, shifting behind
all right.
you up
No
there.
problem. We deal with that.
But I wanted her to demonstrate this. Should I stand, or is it okay that I sit?
Perfect.
Am I okay where I am? Okay, great. About how we work in a flexible learning environment in our classroom. We're actually fortunate enough to have a class set of Chromebooks, which we can access pretty regularly in our classroom. And Tess, can you go introduce yourself and say something you feel about Chromebooks? This function is called Read and Write for Google.
So like
You got it, honey.
backwards.
There we go. Hold on a second, buddy. Ooh, there we go.
I'm Tess Fontana. I like the Chromebook because they help me type my fairy tale faster.
It's okay. It'll do it. Perfect. Great. Leave it right there. Awesome. I love that Tess added in the punctuation. I'm actually going to shift your eyes from there to a sheet. I actually put at everyone's spot to give you an example of what Tess used, or what our entire class used in live time today with the Chromebooks on Google Drive using a Google Doc. So the sheet you have in front of you, students responded to a prompt, but all 23 students in my class responded at the same time, in live time to the prompt, whereas something that looks like this, kind of in the, I'm just going to say in the olden days prior to this year, you know, may have taken a lot of effort and a lot of work to produce something that looked like this. And a beautiful byproduct of what happened was that because it was in live time, the children were interacting with each other and peer editing across the room. I'm going to add a T to your listen, so-and-so, because it's not there, or you forgot a period, so I will add it. So they were going up and down the document, peer editing in live time, and this product, without my editing, from 8-year-old to 9-year-old editing, occurred in 15 minutes, which is phenomenally outstanding, as well as it's done. And Tess modeled for you another example of how we can use Read and Write for Google. Tess is also going to highlight another feature for Read and Write for Google, which is, go ahead Tess, say what's going to happen.
I'm going to play it back.
Great.
I'm Tess Montana. The Chromebook has to help me find my fairy tale faster.
Okay, and what Tess is going to realize is that, whoops, there was an error in there, and she's going to go back through and fix it. Again, right away, not waiting for feedback. She's getting that instant feedback through her tool, and she's able to make that correction right away, which I think is amazing. I've highlighted some specific ends policies. Interestingly, in reading them, I had some from each section. In the 1.1 section, demonstrating independent thought, curiosity, and creativity popped right out to us there. In the 1.2, there were many. Comprehending, interpreting, and evaluating a wide range of written material. Writing in a clear, concise, organized manner. Expressing themselves creatively and effectively. Using technology as appropriate. Again, living responsibly with confidence in the 1.3, demonstrating effective time management and organizational skills, and then 1.4, being proud of our shared experience and having fun along the way. As I read the ends policy and matching it to the circumstance, they just kept flooding out as we were experiencing this. As I said, this year our class has been fortunate to have a cart of Chromebooks easily accessible, and with this access to Chromebooks, students have been able to use a variety of tools to support them continuing to grow as more independent writers, readers, and researchers. Students often think that once a piece was typed, it was done. Through Google Docs, we can provide peer-to-peer as well as teacher-to-student editing on the typed document in real time, as an example in front of you. This tool, this tool, Read Write for Google, reads the story. So when students listen, they're effectively motivated, as you saw, to punctuate, spell, and organize their writing more effectively to match their thinking. Our third graders also use Chromebooks for information retrieval in real time. If we have a question, we want to learn more, or continue to develop awareness of individual learning styles, interests, and passions, we have the tools to access on demand, and we're very grateful. Right, Tess? With effective learning experience, our third graders are able to build independence, confidence in themselves as learners and thinkers, and they're consistently able to be proud of themselves while having fun. Right? Yeah, it's good to know. Good to know. Thank you. Thank you.
Yay.
Okay, so I don't know who wants to go first. You're not going to play it quite yet. So Chromebooks have become an integral part of my day. I've worked to enhance the students' learning and opportunities with technology. We have used the same program that Tess just showed you how to use. We've also used Google Docs for conferring, where students write and then they share the document with someone else and they can make comments on it, and then they can go back and make changes, which has been a great added bonus to our writing program. It improves their editing skills and their smoothness in writing. We've also used it with such projects as, we used to do a Story Keepers project with Natalie Kinsey Warnock, where she comes and teaches kids about how to access Ancestry Classroom and find a grave and those kinds of things. And in the past, it's been very difficult to be able to co-teach that with her. This year, she and I met and we actually made the project much bigger, and the students actually used those sites to research Vermont soldiers. And then we created a Vermont museum display that they showed, and now they're using those same tools independently on their own to actually research their own ancestors. So they'll be presenting that to Natalie at the end of the year, which again is using the technology to do that. The project that you see in front of you actually addressed 13 different ends policies. I'm having the students just highlight 4. So they're actually going to show you the video that they created. I'm going to tell you about that project. But the ENDS policies that I'm highlighting for you is gathering and analyzing data to construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others, cooperating, collaborating, and leading others, using technology, mixed media, and instrumentation as appropriate, and then being proud of ourselves and our experience and having fun along the way. So those are the ones we're highlighting today, but there were 13 of them that we actually addressed. So the actual project was our Civil War unit. The students, we learned about, the border states, and they had to choose in their groups which border state they wanted to become. And then they had to decide which government they wanted to petition to join that state. So then they had to then go through and research what that state had to offer, the government that they were petitioning. And then I said to them, you have less than a minute to create, I mean, they have a video, the video has to be less than a minute to convince me, the government of both sides, the Union or the Confederacy, that you should join. And so then we probably spent about 4 hours on the project total, after we did a lot of work with playing around with it. And then each of the students are going to show you what it is they came up with, and then they're going to share answers to questions that I created from those 4 days policies. So you girls can go first.
Hello, neighbors. Rick Bloom, Georgia IV, and Thomas Norton. We are a border state. We are here to talk to you about joining the Confederate States of America, President Jefferson. We want to join the Confederacy. You may think that the Union side is a bad place because they have factories and they don't shelter the people that we have. And I couldn't agree anymore. Today we want to unite with the Confederate States of America. We have so many things to offer to the South that Georgia could never provide. Yes, we can offer so much that you'll love to have us. We produce tons of cotton, which can help the South gain money, which can go to the soldiers' uniforms, getting more food, or even hiring more slave kidnappers. We also provide lots of wealthy people and jobs. If we have more wealthy people than the Union, then they will have to join the South and there will be more slavery. We also have so many animals too. We have pigs, cows, horses, and mules. Our animals can help us feed the soldiers, and the horses will help us on the battlefields. We can sell them all to the other states for our country. We can provide so much, President Davis. You will feel bad for the rest of your life if you don't let us join the Confederate States of America.
So that particular one, they chose to join the Confederacy, which is the opposite of what their belief is. And again, it was a big challenge because they had to go in and really think, why would we really want to join them and what do we have to offer? Which was great. So girls, if you can read the question that's or the statement at the top and then respond to it.
So my question was, what was it like working with your classmates on this project? And it was like a mix of everything, because sometimes you are doing really well and like you are going really fast and really productive, but at other times like you just sit there and stare at the screen, not knowing what to do. But we had fun, but we definitely learned a lot of experiences, like how to handle like people that really aren't wanting to do it at that moment or not really wanting to do it at all, but yeah. So we kind of learned all of it, but at the end when we finished it, it was really great because we celebrated and it was really fun.
So my question was, what did you learn about the process of using WeVideo? And I learned a lot about WeVideo, but like the most important thing that I learned is through the process that when you record the voices that we had, you want to do one big recording, because if you do a bunch of different ones, then your pictures will get all jumbled up, and it just gets really difficult. But you also have to learn how to be patient with everybody else, and because some people don't work at the same pace as you do, and you just kind of have to be patient with that. And sometimes it will get very frustrating, but you just have to know that in the end, like Catherine said, we all celebrated, and it's good.
So, gentlemen? So as you can see, I really feel that the Chromebooks and the use of them in the classroom has really transformed my teaching.
teaching as well as the students learning. Those of you whose students have had me as a teacher, I've been teaching Civil War for the 18 years I've been in 5th grade. But this year I was able to try a variety of different things and to really try to use that technology not as a pencil but actually as a way to transform how students were learning and presenting.
You're still doing
Kentucky! Listen up, Southern government. We're Kentucky. We want to fight with these Confederates for life. We're gonna shoot them Billy Yanks. We have thousands of men ready to fight. We have the third highest slave population, 38,000 for numbers. Our economy runs mainly on Kentucky's cash crop, tobacco. We're ready to fight us, Confederates, with you. But are you ready to let us fight for you?
Yeah, it's just like music. Yeah.
So gentlemen, can you read your statements?
Okay.
So my question was explain how proud you are of your video project, and I think I'm really proud of what our group did because a lot of the time it just goes smoothly and then you always hit this kink and then you have to try and get around it. Like we were having some trouble with recording audio, our pictures and captions would get a little all over the place. So we really just had to try and persevere through it and try and come up with how can we fix this with efficient time usage. So it was just a lot of thinking about how we could do it quickly, efficiently, and if everyone wanted to do it too, because compromise was a big thing.
Okay. So my question was, how did you and your group decide what arguments or ideas you would include in your video? So, well, we didn't really have any arguments about that were in the video. We just argued about other ideas. So it was basically just one big compromise. We always had to compromise because there's a lot of arguing. So we had to compromise because none of us could agree on anything. So we just said some things, but we mainly persevered through it as long as 100%. And so at the end it was really fun.
Very, very much. Thank you. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and share with you what the students have done in the classroom around the video and the use of Chromebooks and how we try to meet the ENDS policies as much as we can in the elementary school.
Yeah, that's impressive, and it sounds like some of the lesson was about the Civil War.
It was definitely a combination of both.
So you are still marching though, right?
We go to the Civil War reenactors on Friday, and they'll actually do the marching there with them, which is an amazing experience. So we'll be doing that on Friday. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
So we have announcements that you can do for the student reps.
Yes. Do we have student rep announcements? Great.
Okay, so the FHCMS Spring Musical Pippin will be presented in public performances on Friday, May 8th at 7 p.m. and Saturday, May 9th at 2 and 7 at South Burlington High School. And tickets are available at the middle school, before and after school, as well as at the door. In Chamberlain, some upcoming events is on May 6th. There's a VT walk and roll to school day. On May 15th, there's a fun run. On May 20th, there's a PTO meeting from 6 to 7:30. And on May 22nd, there's the FHCMS Jazz Band performance.
Going along with that, on May 25th, it's Memorial Day, so no school. The PAC Thank You Community Dinner is on Wednesday, May 13th from 5:30 to 7 at South Burlington High School. And at the dinner, PAC will honor all of its volunteers and community partners. Also, the Common Roots tag sales on Friday, May 8th from 2:30 to 7 and Saturday, May 9th from 8 to 1.
Also, this past week, one of South Burlington High School's biggest clubs of DECA, it's a business club, went to the international conference in Orlando, Florida. And also, coming up for juniors is a lot of standardized testing, as kneecaps are next week, and the SBAC testing are the weeks after.
going off of that, their APs are happening right now, this week and next week. So everyone's studying, everyone's busy. Yeah, very
Does
busy.
everyone include some of you too?
Yeah. And also prom is coming up next weekend, so people are getting ready for that, and it's pretty big in our school, so that's fun.
Great.
Good, thank you both.
A couple of just quick other things on the announcements. The master planning and the library did a visioning. This is the community library, and I just wanted to let you know that happened last week. And there was a city branding meeting discussion going on too, and I think, part of my conversation or our conversation with Kevin, along with master planning and visioning, there's I think a real need to make sure we're holding those things together. So again, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. Likely you were, because it was in the paper, but thank you.
Good. All right, any other announcements? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 6, zoning on school district properties.
So we are happy to have Paul Connor with us. And welcome, Paul.
And Jessica Louisa.
And Jessica, yes, welcome to you as well. So this was put on our agenda, and Paul was kind enough to come to our meeting to talk a little bit about zoning on our school district properties. As you know, there was a period ago we went through kind of the form-based code conversation, but really looking at this from the lens of versatility of our properties and making sure the board's informed about where we are and where we may want to go or what you may want to suggest. So, Paul, welcome.
All right. May I approach with a little handout?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Not All right. So, Paul Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning for the city, and Jessica Luisos, Chair of the South Burlington Planning Commission. We're here just to give you a brief overview of the planning and zoning that exists around each of your schools. The memo that I just handed out, and I'm happy to send an email or provide copies to anybody else, briefly summarizes the zoning on each of the schools. So Chamberlain, Orchard, here at the Marcotte, and then the joint one for the middle and high school, as well as a very brief summary of what's around it in each case. And then here in the around the Marcotte school, there's also one page that describes what the draft changes to the zoning are. So that's a little summary for you guys to look at. As a visual aid here, I'm also just going to give you this slightly frighteningly multicolored map, which I think uses every color and every symbol and every shade of every color and every shade of every symbol that could be used, because there's about 35 different zoning districts in the city. This is our current zoning map, and circled in blue are the approximate areas of the school properties, just to give you a little bit of an overview in here. So just to speak briefly about the current one, and then happy to answer any questions that you have, because that's really what we're here for. The Chamberlain School, the Orchard School, and the Middle High School complex are all presently in what's called the municipal district. It is what it sounds like it is. The anticipated uses within it are educational facilities, municipal facilities, outdoor recreation, community centers, indoor recreation, and the possibility of some office space. So that's basically what those are designated as. The intent is, because they're municipally owned, either on the city side or the school side. The high school property also includes a large wooded area in behind it that includes mostly wetland area. That's presently zoned Parks and Recreation, which is exactly what it sounds like it is. I'll speak about the Marcotte School last, but around each of the three that exists are zoning regulations that essentially reflect what you see out there. So the Chamberlain School is surrounded by our residential 4 district, which allows for housing at 4 housing units per acre, which is about what you see out there. The Orchard School is surrounded on the north, east, and west by that same district. North, east, and south. And on the west side, it's our commercial 1 auto district, which allows the types of things that you see out there now, up to the intensity, it could theoretically be up to the intensity of what you see on Farrell Street over there, though realistically the properties are not that deep over in that area, so it's unlikely that something quite that large would be seen. The Marcotte School is a little bit different. It has been zoned for a number of years as Central District 1, which is really our most urban district. It obviously allows for schools, as we're sitting in one, but also allows for a variety of other activities and uses. Lots of different commercial activities, social services, higher density residential than anywhere else in the city. We don't presently have very much of it for a variety of reasons, but that's what is there presently. And it's surrounded on the south by the same district, and on the north by the Commercial 1 Residential 12 district, which is similar to what you see on Williston Road, what you see on Shelburne Road, especially the things that have come in the last few years, like the New England Federal Credit Union building on Shelburne Road, or the new Homewood Suites Hotel that has just gone up on Dorset Street. Those are in the same district and are sort of the scale of what could be allowed. The planning for these areas, the city has, I'll speak again lastly about Marcotte, but the city has undertaken recently a corridor study along Shelburne Road, mostly looking at how do we move people efficiently, effectively, and by multiple modes, both within Shelburne Road, but also how do people from Shelburne Road get up to Spear Street. Really, that's mostly a transportation analysis, looking long-term at what do we do. The Chamberlain School is in a neighborhood that has seen a lot of change, as you all know, for the last many years. And just earlier, I guess it's last month now, in April, the city, together with you all, the airport, the Regional Planning Commission, and the City of Burlington, have initiated a project, the Chamberlain Neighborhood Airport Planning Study, which is the first real opportunity to do a neighborhood level plan for this neighborhood in many, many, many years, if ever. It's just kicked off. The committees had their first meeting, and they are going to be having their first community public meeting on May 27th. Really just to envision what could be the future of this neighborhood. There's been a lot of change. A lot of homes are in the process of coming down right now, adjacent to the airport. City Center is on the other side of it. Discussion points are going to be things like, what should the transition be to the airport? What does the neighborhood want to see as that? What are the possibilities? What improvements can exist within the neighborhood? Either capital improvements like investments in parks and sidewalks or crosswalks, things like that, or possibly changes in regulations for that area. Many people over the years have said that it would sure be nice if there could be more front porches on homes. Right now, there's a lot of restrictions that make that very difficult for homes. Expansions of home-based businesses, maybe or maybe not. The airport grocery is a very popular place, but it's the only one allowed in that area because it's grandfathered. Would a coffee shop be something that the community wanted to see or not want to see? Those kinds of questions, as well as how do we deal with all the transportation going through there, to and from the airport, to and from the neighborhood, through the neighborhood that has nothing to do with schools, people, or the airport, of people coming from Colchester down to work somewhere else in South Burlington, where that's the route through. So those are the questions that they're going to be wrestling with, and they're aware. You mentioned the school visioning and master planning. They're aware that this is all under discussion. As their project moves forward, they're aware that subject is up for discussion, as all the schools are up for discussion, and they'll be paying attention to it as we go, and we'll learn as we go. So that's the big planning going on there. And then lastly, the Marcotte area, You've heard a lot about City Center. The city's done a lot of work in a lot of different avenues around this, transportation, TIF districts, zoning, things like that. David mentioned the form-based codes project. For the last couple of years, the city has been working on a update and revamping of the regulations in this area. The goal is to encourage a walkable, mixed-use, enjoyable environment as a core of the city, which is also a goal of the current regulations in there, the Central District 1, but to do it in a manner that is attractive and incentivizing for everybody by setting a pretty high bar in terms of what's expected for development, but doing it in a way that is predictable for the development community, so that if you meet the threshold, then it's a very clear process for approval, essentially. There are many moving parts, of course, of this in terms of planning for Garden Street, which has been going on, planning for Dumont Park to make sure that there's active park area in there, transportation analyses to look at how do we make sure that we're able to move people long-term with new development, so on and so forth. And yeah, the zoning in this area would allow for a wide variety of uses, as opposed to being permissive, in which case the current zoning lists all the things that can be allowed. It flips it on its head and says those things which are not allowed, and it's a limited list of what's not allowed. There are special considerations regarding all the regulations for municipal and school facilities that allow those facilities to have greater flexibility. Nothing in here would preclude a new or a continuation of an existing facility, whether it be school or city or, frankly, existing businesses. But so that's the 2-cent tour of the whole thing. Do you want to add anything before we get to questions?
No, you're very thorough.
All right, do you want to open it up for questions?
I have a few questions. One was, do you know when this area, Marcotte, was zoned for the Central District 1? Do you know, I mean, about how long has that zoning been in place?
The zoning district as a whole was put in the mid-'80s. I don't know off the top of my head whether the central school property was included from the very beginning or not. I'd be happy to take a look. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just, it's interesting that it's the odd one out as far as the others are municipal use, and then this area is Central District 1. I was just wondering if what the reason for that was, and the timing. I guess the timing, you're thinking the 1980s. I mean, was there an initiative there that they thought that sometime down the road it might be used for something different than a municipal use, or is there any kind of record that would shed light
what
on
I can say is that in the 1985 comprehensive plan was the first plan to envision a city center in and around Market Street. It was shortly after that the Dorset Street project took place, which was the first bricks and mortar project to support city center, of widening the road, putting the bike paths in, undergrounding the utilities, which was possibly one of the first projects in the state to do that. Obviously, a lot of things didn't happen at that time also. As for the school piece of it, I'd really have to look to see when that was included, whether that was done initially or whether that was done in the mid-2000s when the environmental assessment for Market Street and the federal dollars that we received for Market Street, it may have been commensurate with that too, because I know at that point there was a lot of visioning that took place in the community, and it included this property here at Marcotte School. So I'd have to go back and look. You happen to know off the top of your head, David?
Yeah, I mean, I actually do think that would be fairly important if there's already been a community process. I mean, I'm just going to take the assumption that a recommendation comes back to Sellers. I don't know that that's going to be it at all, but that's the frame of mind I'm taking with some of these questions. And if there was a process that wasn't that long ago, that was a full community process to consider what this property could be used for, that might change how we might want to proceed. It doesn't necessarily mean there's not going to be a process, which will be another question I'll have in a second. But it's different than something happening way back in the 80s. I mean, it's just...
Sure. We can take a look and see what we can find. The dates will be helpful. I think a second part of the question will be when there was a visioning that took place, was it looking from a, if it should happen to take place, what should go on the property versus an active discussion about whether it should whether the school should be sold. Those might be two different community conversations.
There was a discussion.
In terms of
whether this school should be sold at some point. Wasn't there back in the
not
late 2000s?
Not in.
It was very general. Or maybe
well,
it was the start of the discussion.
It was the viability of another location. Thank you. Because at the time there was an assessment of the viability of the Oak Creek property.
Okay.
And part of that process was a valuation of this property, and they weren't necessarily entirely linked, but the properties hadn't been valued in quite a while, so those went hand in hand, and that was when I was early on the board. So
for example, back in 2011 or 2012, we did a visioning in October, and out of that there were two versions of a concept idea that came out. One showed with a school, one showed without a school. Mm-hmm. And it was really not evaluating whether there should be a school or not, but just sort of saying, what if? Right. And it wasn't intended to be a value judgment on whether there would be, but just in the possibility that there might be a sale, what could this look like one way or the other? We'd have to look back to see whether previous ones pose the question of whether.
Right. Yeah, and I'm actually less concerned about the whether it happens as opposed to just what was the community input about how this property could be used if it was sold. And that could form a jumping off point if indeed that's where the decision comes to, where we want to sell this. The other question, which actually is a follow-up, and this may be as much for Jessica, but it's for both of you, is that if Central were to be sold, if the committee or the task force comes back to us with that recommendation, and if we agree to it, what would be the planning commission of the city's process, for what the property could be used for in a sale, or is it just what the zoning is right now? Maybe I'll ask slightly different. I know that for the other parts of the city center, there's been planning of where the roads are going to go and what the streets will look like. For all of a sudden, if this 11 acres, is it 11 acres? Is that about what it is? If all of a sudden that is part of the process, is there a planning process that you folks would go through to figure out where's the street going to go and those kind of things? Is that a clear enough or muddy enough question that you can say whatever you want?
Sure, that's a good question. So, right now it's being considered as part of T4 because it's very similar to what the existing zoning is. Right. We have recently, as recently as our last meeting, actually been talking about the bones of a street network, like where we think streets would go. The initial concept with the form-based code was that there would be a block standard, and it would just say every 400 feet or whatever the number is, there'd be a block. That turned out to be very difficult to come up with actual concrete language to actually have that come into play. So what we've recently been working on, and in the draft now, we're looking at including the map that is in front of you, or at least some version very similar to that, to actually lay out approximately where the roads would go. And this would be included similar to our official map, where if a property would be developed, that particular connection we think is, as a city, is important to be able to get from point A to point B, and so the road wouldn't need to be in that exact spot, right, but to make that transportation connection between those points we think is important. And A lot of the roads that are on the map there are either existing, they're in the process of being planned currently, or some of them actually came out of the recent Williston Road Corridor study we just had a presentation on from VHB a few weeks ago. So they had actually looked at transportation along that corridor and where it would be most important to have connections in and out of city center, specifically in addition to expected traffic in the area. So so what you have there is the little dashed black lines are representing, where we think those connections in and out of city center would be most appropriate to really provide the circulation as well as the block size that would allow for a more conducive pedestrian environment. A big part of the block standard was, as somebody's walking down the road, if there aren't enough connections or enough it doesn't circulate well. It doesn't create for an environment where people are really going to want to walk around.
So based on this, there's a requirement for a road through the central property? That's what it looks
you
like.
Am I talk a little bit better?
Is that a form-based code requirement?
Well, the tool here is called the official map,
Okay.
which is a slightly different legal tool, but it goes hand in hand with the form-based code.
Mm-hmm.
The tool of the official map would require that the space for a roadway be reserved, and depending on what development proposal comes in, commensurate with any development proposal, the construction of a roadway. An important thing to note in here, and I forgot to bring the other sheet with me, is the city already has an official map in place. The current official map for City Center actually looks relatively similar to this, the difference being that rather than that road that you see through the Marcotte School the way it is, there's actually a different road that cuts from approximately the Barnes and Noble horizontally across the school property over to Midas Drive. So it actually goes east-west instead of north-south. The analyses, as we said, that we've received, as well as a lot of the public input over the years, has suggested that east-west road isn't necessarily as important as there is Market Street. But just for context, to understand that policy's been in place for at least, that map dates from 2004, so at least 11 years that there's been a planned road. It just happens to be in a slightly different direction there. But that's the concept there. To answer your question, the second half of your question, Martin, the process by which any decision would be made about how to develop a property or how it should look if it were ever sold. A zoning regulation like the form-based code is neutral on ownership. It doesn't matter who owns property. This is a baseline of what any property owner would do, would have to do as far as the city is concerned. Whether any particular property owner were to decide to set its own attributes that it's looking for, that's up to that property owner. That could be something like a public entity such as yourselves choosing to do something like that, and establishing what you're looking for as the property owner. It happens in the private sector. South Village, for instance, as new homes come in, they have very specific design criteria above and beyond anything that the city has about what their vision for it is, even if they have multiple developers. So that's a private sector example of that. That's a question for, if you reach that point, for you to discuss if you want, and to discuss with other parties. That's not something that zoning, which sets a baseline for everybody, does.
Well, I'm a little confused about that, unless we're gonna become land barons here and get to decide what the houses look like that get put here. I suppose as a property owner, we could do that.
Well, you asked the question of what are the processes. No, I can't determine that process for you.
Right.
If it were sold or leased or anything like that, without specific conditions, these regulations would be what guides future development.
Right.
In addition to that, the city council is working on a tax increment finance policy. That policy may establish, or is likely to establish, some objectives of if TIF financing is going to be used, then maybe a certain quality or amount or scale of development is going to be sought to make sure that it's a good return on investment, things like that. So that's
Sure.
another tool in the toolbox.
Well, let me, I guess, ask, so there's a few options if this property were gonna be sold. One is that we still have the central district one, if that hasn't changed, but that's likely to change. And to
We would think it's likely
to-
to change. I
to
mean, it's really
T4.
ultimately up to the city council, but
Sure.
we're feeling pretty close to getting to the point of getting it on to
Okay.
them, but
So I'll assume it's T4 and it's as it is, and there's some roads that are suggestions essentially, but if the property owner buys all 11 acres, they don't necessarily have to put those roads there. That's not gonna be required, or is it?
I think it is, right?
As proposed, it becomes a requirement that those be reserved for, and then depending on the development, built if it's needed to serve the development.
So,
I'm sorry, I just want to add a quick one on that. This is not the current official map, it's the one that has the
This is the
east-west.
draft, yes.
So how does this version get adopted?
It's a process similar to adopting zoning regulations. It would probably take place at the same time. Planning Commission has to hold a public hearing, consider comment, goes to the city council considers it, holds a public hearing, and then adopts it if they choose.
so at the same time as the form-based code is going through?
That would be the
Essentially?
typical process, to
Okay.
do them both at the same time, because they're tools that go hand in hand.
So, I guess the other question is that, I mean, it could go through and you have, let's say the T4 and these roads are adopted at a point where we might want to sell the property if it comes to that. Could there still be additional restrictions? It wouldn't be the school board putting them on there, let me make that clear. But I mean, if the community, if South Burlington, because this is South Burlington's land essentially, I mean, would there be a possibility of a process that would allow the community to weigh in to say, this is what we want to see in these 11 acres? I mean, is that a necessary process? I mean, does it have to happen, or?
That's a question that can be discussed and is an open question.
Right, okay.
There's the entire scope of the rainbow is a possibility in there, from there being requirements upon any kind of sale of land that set certain community goals,
Right.
or a fee simple sale of land without any restrictions.
Right.
That's really a question that would be determined by whoever ultimately, if the land were to be sold, sells the land. Are there any conditions on it at that time?
Right. Okay.
And that's, as I said, there's really the entire scope of the rainbow on what could be done in something like that, and that's a discussion that hasn't certainly taken place at our end.
Right. Nor
in part because it's not municipally owned, city-owned land, and in part because there's been no decision or recommendation yet,
Right.
and wouldn't want to jump the gun on anything.
This is, I mean, this, who knows where it's gonna go, but this is just necessary, I think, background information.
Yep.
That's helpful for me at least.
So Paul, from a process standpoint, and just help me out, are these three distinct processes, even though you've indicated they'll go hand in hand? Is T4 zoning a separate process, or is that part of form-based code?
Form-based code is really just a writing style,
Right.
similar to Google Docs.
Thank you.
So the T4 is just a zone within a form-based code, which is just a style of zone.
Okay, so form-based code adoption
zoning.
is zoning. That's
zoning,
one,
yeah.
and that's planning commission.
Planning Commission, City Council both have to hold public hearings.
Okay.
The official map is a slightly different legal tool that would be done at the same time.
Okay.
So you would
And
see
same
two public
entities?
hearing notices,
Yep.
but they'd probably be taking place at the same time.
And that's planning commission and city council as
Right,
well. Okay.
Right. So it would probably be side by side
Mhm.
at the same time.
Okay.
Um,
And is there any other process that the planning commission, and city council or other entity would go through that would impact the area that includes Central School?
I mentioned a moment ago the TIF policy.
Mm-hmm.
So the city council is presently beginning to look at their policy for how they would consider the when to do
Mhm.
public-private partnerships.
Mhm.
That's a city council action to adopt that policy. Any actual indebtedness that the city council would undertake to pay for a stormwater facility, a parking garage, the local share of Market Street, things like that,
Mhm.
that would any indebtedness would go to the voters. So that's a process. That's a financial process that might have an impact on how development would look.
So there really then are form-based code and draft official map would be concurrent with the planning commission and city council.
Yep.
TIF policy would be driven by the city council and determine kind of when to do public partnerships. And then any indebtedness goes to the community or voter.
Right, go through the city council to the voters.
And are those, is that an order that those would occur as well? I assume, indebtedness doesn't necessarily have to occur, but
Right.
Is that-
There's nothing requiring there to be indebtedness, but a TIF doesn't get used unless there's indebtedness. So I'm going to take a little bit of a leap and say that would be the goal of the order of things, to have the regulations in place so that people understand what the playing field is,
Mhm.
to have a policy in place for the TIF, although which one of those happens first is not too
Mhm.
important. And then after having a policy in place, then the council may consider some indebtedness
Mhm.
on one or more projects. It could be any of the range of potential eligible projects in there.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to follow up to pondering one of your answers, and I want to follow up with this. And no matter how much I would like to be a land baron and control those things, that's not the school board's bailiwick. But if it's the school board, ultimately, that can put restrictions, is what I'm hearing, can put restrictions on what this property will be used for as far as what we're going to propose to the community. Presumably, we're not the ultimate arbiters of that either. It's going to be a vote for whether the property will be sold with the restrictions, presumably. I'm trying to figure this out. But I'm also trying to figure out how we would, if it comes to that, it seems that at the point where we've decided to sell, if we ever get there, it's more the city and the planning commission's interest in what happens with that property as part of city center. Is that not a true statement? As far as just where balance of interests are, we're here running schools. We're not here trying to figure out your city center. So if that's the case, somewhere here, this planning commission, the city has to be much more involved in what should happen with that property beyond just the you are doing that by doing the zoning, obviously, but if there's more that the community wants, would it not be?
It could
just
be
throwing that out.
there's a lot of things that we've heard envisioning that may not directly translate into the base code itself. Like one of the things that we've talked about a lot is the idea of maybe a central green, but it's not something that's easy to just put in the zoning. That would need to be kind of a separate process, or there's people have talked about maybe wanting to have a library or move the library to a different spot. There's been a lot of things that have kind of come out with people talking about what they vision, but some of those aren't written in stone in our zoning. So
there's the possibility that maybe the planning commission, if it came to that, could be involved with the planning process, just because we've already maybe heard from people some of what they might like, and then we do hearings and public outreach, possibly not in year two, I don't know.
Right, I just don't think that the community would be interested in the school board just, if that's the decision, to just sell this 11 acres in fee simple. I think that the community would want to have some sideboards on that. It's not for us to decide, I don't think, and that's, well, we'll have to think about this as we get down the road.
Yeah, and we haven't, I mean, you know, the thought that occurred to me as you were saying that, Martin, is first off, both school board and the city council represent the same community.
Right.
So it's not like there are us and them issues.
No.
However, there may be the potential for some gap information here that in our assessment, or whatever comes back in terms of a recommendation about the sale of the property itself, if there are, I'm anticipating some additional addendum of information from the steering committee, but what we're hearing a little bit is that there may be gaps that exist with the process that you've outlined here, but we don't really know yet. I guess my point, though, is we do represent the same.
Sure, but it's a matter of the expertise and really what is our primary mission. That's more.
Well, and I think the plan was always that the board, on hearing the recommendation, will go through some version of due diligence on our own, but it'll largely be driven by what the recommendation is too. So.
I think it's good food for thought. I don't have an answer for you tonight on that question, but it's good food for thought for us, and we'll certainly relay that information back on our end as well.
And just from a logistical standpoint, one of the how do financial issues get addressed between the entities of the city and the school district? For instance, again, it's the same community member and taxpayer. So if there's a significant upside in the TIF revenue, for instance, based on the policy the city council is going to recommend, but that is not, there is indebtedness that the school district might incur in building a new facility based on recommendation. You can argue in aggregate that's a wash for the taxpayer, for the community, but we vote on those budgets separately too. So can you give me a little bit of insight there? I hadn't really thought a lot about that before now.
I think the best insight that I can give you on the spot right now is that it's a very good question. And it's probably several levels above my area of knowledge and expertise at this moment. I think it's a very important and good question, and I know it's something that is certainly stirring in the back of all of our minds. That it is, as you say, the same responsible taxpayer to all entities, but ultimately budgets are separate. So I don't have a good answer for you at the moment, except to say that it's a very good question that should be looked at, and I don't know if anyone else has anything more intelligent to add to that at the moment.
I feel like I asked a good question if I stumped you, Paul.
So Paul, obviously there's a series, these are all posted meetings. Are there a series of meetings that are coming up, or ones that the board should be paying attention to, where these conversations, again, I think we recognize that we need to make sure we're being informed, and in part that's why you're here tonight. But what's the kind of upcoming schedule?
Right, some key dates to be looking forward, and the main two pieces of puzzle that the city side is looking at right now is the TIF policy and getting these regulations and the official map completed. Our loose target right now for the TIF policy is that the city council will be looking at in early June, probably their second, or mid-June, probably their second meeting in June. That's the last target that I've seen, but I don't control their agenda. With the planning commission probably taking a look at it in their first meeting in June. around the land development regulations and this, I'll let Jessica answer that question as she's
About
chair.
the
schedule.
schedule?
Yeah.
It's, isn't that what you just said?
No, I was saying the TIF policy. It might be the same
It's
schedule,
pretty
but
similar, actually.
Okay.
I think we were thinking end of June for some of our public hearings, assuming we stay on schedule, so the city council more like early August. I mean, it's hard to know because if we have some big issues that we're hearing from the public in our public hearings, you know, we may need to take some more time to look at things before it will get passed to the city council.
So that's all the form-based code zoning, including this property here and all, okay.
right.
Yes.
For the whole city.
And a series of other amendments citywide
okay.
that are not necessarily germane to this conversation, but there's almost.
Again, it wasn't that long ago, we had the conversations on the T4 zoning, and, you know, there was particular due diligence on the board around, you know, surroundings, you know, bars and nightclubs and things of that nature, which really, I think, brought to fruition kind of the board's attention of how are things zoned. I think the board remains, wanting to make sure there's due diligence on behalf of our children. And I think also the flexibility of all of the current properties with that kind of lens as well, around security and safety and flexibility opportunities for those lands. And it sounds like, you know, that contradiction between municipal district and the T4, I mean, is really what we need to be paying attention to and working, listening, and collaborating with. Again, I think as Elizabeth said, we're on the same. We need to be on the same page.
We're all responsible to the same folks.
So, again, this has been helpful to us. I'm envisioning there's a fair amount of follow-up things that we need to be doing, but it's been really helpful for us to.
Let me give you one more handout since I brought it with me, just for you to take a look at. I brought the basic guts of what a T4 looks like. It's a lot of numbers, so I apologize in advance for these numbers, but if anyone has any questions, that's what I'm here for. Jessica is also certainly available if you have questions directly for her. Her email address is on our website, and the Planning Commission meets pretty regularly. So I think you know how to reach me, but I'll leave a few cards here in case yourselves or any members of the audience have any questions.
So the other thing that may actually help you visioning is we actually had a 3-dimensional video mock-up made. I don't know if you've seen that, but you know, there's quite a few other areas in city center other than just this property that are also zone T4. So you know, if you were kind of looking at the map of T4 and then watching that video, you might get a good feel for what it could look like.
Is that on the website?
Yep, it's on the city website. So Market Street is called T5, which is a little more intense. But other than Market Street, anything south of Market Street is T4, and the architects that we hired to do it, we gave them editorial freedom. We said, here's the draft regulation. You guys come up with what could be possible under here. And so you'll see a variety of things in there. You'll see some medium scale housing. You'll see some larger commercial facilities. All of that is within the range of what could happen in a T4.
Any other questions? Yeah, this is very helpful. Thank you. Thank you both for taking
Anytime.
the
Happy to
time.
come back anytime.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Jessica.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 7, master planning, financial stewardship, and city school collaboration.
Hey, wait a minute. Sorry.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Barner, are you here for the consent agenda?
If that's the,
Can we move to that? Because the length of our agenda is such that I hate to have him have to sit through our whole meeting.
Are you interested in any other agenda items?
Steve's interested in everything. It was nice of you to ask, Julie.
It's such a long agenda. What do you mean?
I warned him.
You did? He's here for the bid on the STEM, I'm guessing on the
That was
laser
good to-
cutter
that was good
STEM
to call that out.
program item.
Mr. Young, would you like to amend the agenda to move the consent agenda
I think that would seem reasonable.
to sometime earlier than 10 o'clock?
Yep. I think that's fine, you know. Given this consent agenda and often not a lot of conversation, I don't think public
Can
would
we
be
do
coming
this
to
and
that.
just wait for Dan to
Sure.
come back? And why don't we cover master planning, financial stewardship, and
Sure.
and Patrick, and then we'll move it as soon as everyone is back. We'll move that. Okay.
Can I ask a question? Can I make a recommendation? It doesn't require everybody. This is more for Meg and Delina, actually. So I'm actually gonna try to go paperless.
Yeah,
I know
that's the
started-
plan.
Today's the first, big run at this, because I've been doing that in the State House. I've actually managed to pull
We
it
have yours
off.
by the way.
But that means that when we get things like this from Paul,
Yeah.
if we have a way that you can
Absolutely.
scan them and
We do. We
email
can-
them to us.
We have a scanner that works fine that way. It'd be a lot easier.
But I mean, can it be part of like the process if we get handouts given to us during meetings that you'll, or Delina will, or whoever will scan?
If
them
we get
and
it,
email
if we get a handout, we can scan them in
a tutorial?
as previous meeting handouts, so we can get them to you.
Did you get them from tonight? Did Paul get those?
No.
Okay, cool.
So
No, no, on
can I just ask a question? Is this packet on here
Yeah.
somewhere?
Yeah.
Well,
I've
you
got stuff on it.
can't
Oh,
find
not
it.
on here. No, you have to get it from
You
your
just
email.
gotta sign into your.
I did.
I think you get it from your email.
Oh.
Okay, so we've lost control of the meeting, but
Sorry.
Oh, I thought we were waiting for.
I thought we were
This is what they do
having a
in the
hiatus.
legislature, they kind of create.
I know.
I thought we were on a
Filibustering.
recess.
No, we're not on a recess.
Oh, okay.
Although now I'm noticing everybody has their laptop of me.
See, I was-
What's up with that?
Come back in the shape.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right, I'm done.
Why don't we go ahead and while we're waiting for Dan to get back, we'll cover agenda item 7.
Yeah. So master planning and visioning is continuing. We have a meeting tomorrow evening, and they are honing in on the options. It appears that there's great movement and great synergy, and then there's what I would say changes to that. So anyway, I'm.
What time is the meeting?
So 5 to 8:30 is the meeting, and again, again the committee's working hard, making a lot of good headway, and again I think they will be ready for providing both the council and the board their feedback options by the June 3rd deadline.
Okay.
Our city school collaboration, actually, Elizabeth and our next meeting is the 19th, and then we have another one scheduled in June, but we also have some things, as you know from tonight's meeting, we need to connect on around that. Certainly zoning configurations in T4 and those things need to come up, I think, as conversations as well. So that's all I have. Financial stewardship, again, that's alive and well. You're going to see that in asset in 2.7. You'll see more of that as and John and his staff have worked hard. You see some bids in front of you that represent some of that stewardship. So things are good.
All right, why don't we keep moving while we're holding off? Although, thank you, Julie, for that suggestion. To the superintendent's report.
Mm-hmm. So just a little update on the Rick Marcotte principal hire here. This is a busy week for that as well. They're down to two candidates, and the two candidates will be actually interviewing tomorrow with the administrators. There's a parent forum tomorrow night. Actually, Stuart's going to be hosting that for folks to come. I meet with both individuals. They get a chance to do some touring, and administrators, if I didn't already say that, will be also interviewing the two candidates.
And the teachers will also have an opportunity as well. And a couple of people, committee, Carol Wheeler and Kristen Corsell will be moderating those events.
So that's a big step. We'll come back together, the groups, and kind of have some synergy around what are we seeing, what are we noticing, and then we'll be making a recommendation to the school board. No Child Left Behind, a little quick update, and Stuart's done a lot of work on this as well. We did, as you know, we sent out letters previously to inform families of the Orchard and Chamberlain community that choice was no longer in existence. And that still is in play. However, we're wanting to, what we're going to say, dot our I's and cross our T's to make sure that under the reauthorization or under No Child Left Behind, if things remain in a status quo, whether that means we have to continue to offer choice, or since it's being reauthorized, if now all schools have that third check mark as not meeting adequate yearly progress, then we would not have to. We'll be able to maintain that. So before we go and make any changes or any placements of students, we're looking at also enrollment numbers. Our enrollment numbers are in the kindergarten are up higher than we expected. So before we do any sort of staffing, we wanted to make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's on that particular
Enrollment
area.
across all kindergartens?
All kindergartens, yeah. Actually, Central School is probably our lowest, underneath the highs of Chamberlain and Orchard. So before we obviously make any sort of staffing review, we want to make sure that that's clear. So there's a lot more detail than that. Stuart's been working hard at keeping and getting those questions asked. I'm actually sending a letter to Rebecca, just wanting some clarity around making sure that we're on sound ground before we do that. Rebecca Holcomb, that is. Mount Mansfield Union Supervisory District, now called the MUD. They were successful in merging some schools together, if you probably read about. They are interested, their supervisory union board is interested in policy governance, and would like to know if a member of the board and myself would be interested in meeting with them just to give them some perspective, kind of where we are, lessons learned. John Alberghini Miller is the superintendent there, and two dates that are available to him, and again I'm open to having anyone go along, June 1st or June 15th. And he put us first on the agenda at the 6:30 time frame. The meeting would be at Campbell's Hump, and again, it's really about looking at perspective and feedback on policy governance. They have elicited feedback from the SBA and that, but they also know that South Burlington has been at it for a while. And
Yeah, I think we may have a conflict with June 1st. Is that one date we're supposed to hold? So I would be happy to go along with you, David, on that.
You want to check June 15th then?
Yeah, let me check that. I probably would prefer June 1st if we don't end up using it, but I think I can do the 15th as well. Okay.
Great.
Unless anyone else really wants to talk policy governance. Okay.
And then
how we really feel about it.
And then the last thing on my report is that Grand Isle Supervisory Union has contacted us about, allowing a middle school student the opportunity to come into Fred Tuttle. As you know, Grand Isle, a lot of our island colleagues have school systems that their grade levels are also in flux. This is a particular situation and request. I did inform the superintendent, who is going to inform their board, that resources are important to this board, that resources follow students. I'm wanting to make this known to you. I don't know what they'll then come back with, but I'm wanting to at least listen to any questions or concerns that you might have about this. Again, part of this is looking at reevaluating our choice agreements. Where we are with some of our choice desires, but choice agreements are certainly something we've been really mindful about. So there are particular circumstances with this situation, because there is a real reason for choice, and when you have such a small N number, it's one classroom, and then you can't offer that. So what are the options afforded to a community like that might alleviate that?
What happens in terms of setting a precedent, because that's not something we usually do? And do we have a capacity number? There's a whole host of questions that I have about that.
Sure, I think there'd be a series of questions that we would then want to ask. I think important at this round, if I'm off base in what I've currently given their superintendent, in other words, that resources should follow, you need to let me know.
Does he have a date that their board is meeting?
He has not provided that to me. I don't know when their next meeting is. My point is, whether or not that is true, that you believe that resources should follow, that may be a showstopper right out of the gate for them. They may say, we're not gonna do that.
I mean, resources should follow from my perspective, but what's happening, what about the fact that we don't typically take those younger kids? I mean, what about our policies?
Yeah, well, again, I think there could be some exceptions to that. There could be a written agreement for this particular situation. You know, we can enter into an agreement similar to what we've done in the past with our other previous choice schools that have high schools also.
Does our policy explicitly exclude students at the other?
It does currently.
It does currently.
Yeah.
So
you'd have to have an exception.
Policy change.
That's
so
right.
It's kind of a two-step process because one, you're just looking at the gatekeeping function first, which is would resources follow, and then it would come as a policy question in front of the board.
That's correct.
And are resources the same for an elementary grade
No.
student? No.
No, they aren't on our announced tuition amount, but that's also.
But they are determined.
That's right.
Right,
Because
okay.
we do have to determine it.
So currently, it's going to go to them. I can find out specifically. It sounds like resources remain important, and we'll see what we get back. If it is something that they'll be willing to entertain, then we can.
If you wouldn't mind, getting a date, because we do have, there's been a period of time that's lapsed, getting information to respond back to the requests that came to the board. So I'd like, just out of courtesy, not to go on too much longer. And I know we can't force a board meeting, but if we could get an idea of what the superintendent's timing is, that would be helpful.
Yep.
Good. All right. Dan, we made an amendment to the agenda. We're going to move the consent agenda up. And we just finished the superintendent's report, unless
Correct.
you have anything
No,
else,
that's it.
David. Right. So we will, just for clarity's sake, we've completed agenda item 8, and we are going to move agenda 18 forward at this time. Do you want to walk through that, David, or?
I'm happy to have actually John. Are you wanting to take 18? So again, you have a series of things going on here with hires, and obviously you have bids in here. So if there are particular questions that you'd like to have taken off and talked about specifically, then that would be the motion that should prevail. Again, you do have a new hires report in your packet.
Is there a motion to modify anything on the consent agenda?
I'd just like to take off the bid for truck with front end loader, please.
All right, we'll take that out of the bid portion of the consent agenda.
Okay.
Any other recommendations to modify the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the new hires recommended, as well as all bids excluding the truck with front-end loader?
So. Second.
Do I have any discussion?
I think since Mr. Barner's here, we should ask him about the STEM thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Could I mention something unrelated, just a kind of announcement? Just to celebrate the fact that you know that the Real World Design Challenge students have presented it to you a couple times. South Burlington again won the state award, so we are now on the trophy 7 times.
Wow. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And they're going back to DC in the fall to do this all again.
Great. Amazing.
And on Saturday, our brand new cybersecurity club won an award at Champlain College, where they went for a full day activity for winning the Northeast region in their category in their first year. So that was pretty exciting too.
Congratulations.
Great.
Now, related to the laser cutter, that is an item that we didn't really think that that we could in the foreseeable future purchase. It is something that's said by many people who operate STEM labs in schools as being one of their most important pieces of equipment, but they're pretty expensive. This fall we learned that an anonymous donor, it's anonymous to us, it's not anonymous to Joanna Bott. She knows who the person is, but she's the only one. Wanted to donate, it was $12,000?
Exactly, yeah.
To the STEM program. And this is actually in $6,000, $1,600,000 next year. And I sat down with Phil Sirks and talked about it, and we said, boy, you know, if we put off some of the purchases that we had planned this year and put some money in that, with that, we could actually get one of these machines. So that's what the item is that's on bid. Just to give you a little example, these are some small examples that the company that we decided that we proposed that we go with. So this is what we're most interested in, this sort of thing, because one of the things that you can see here is, this is made of several flat pieces. You can do very intricate cuts that, so when you're designing something like a robot or something like that, and you need a part, you can actually design it on the computer, and then very quickly you can cut it out with a variety of different materials. That's what we're most interested in. It'll fall apart, probably here, but they also sent some other things because, and this I hadn't really thought about. These are also engravers. You just set the wattage of the laser back, and then you can control your depth of cut. And so, you know, they have these awards and things, and please, I don't want to become the award shop for the district. But
I think you just volunteered.
I was just going to say. But one of the things that you might have heard, I mean, we've heard the term STEM, but you might have heard the term STEAM when you add art. Of course, our students have added B for business, STEM B. But this does open up a lot of opportunities for students to not only add some pizzazz to their designs, but also for students who are just primarily interested in art to have another medium in order to work with. So that in a nutshell is what we're asking for.
And what's the total on this equipment?
It was a little shy of $24,000.
And I'd be remiss not to ask the question, when you are deferring expenses or putting off some expenses in order to free up that funding this year, I assume the board will see those expenses in next year's proposed budget?
They're in our regular budget.
Okay.
So we've just, you know, we do things like we replace digital cameras, and so, you know, we didn't do that this year. It means that now we're approaching the end of the year, we've had 3 fail, but we'll use the money that we would have used this year. Next year, push off some things that we're going to do there. But we thought it was important in order to be able to put a piece of equipment in that would really move our STEM program forward dramatically.
Are there, the other question I had is any ongoing costs associated with it? Would that be a maintenance contract or supplies or things like that?
No, actually no. These are relatively trouble-free devices. In a long term, they say that the lasers will eventually fail and need to be replaced, and those are significant expenses, probably in the neighborhood of $7,000 or $8,000. But the company that we bought, that we've recommended, actually has been selling to schools for almost 10 years now, and they say that they have yet to replace one. So I don't foresee that as being a huge issue.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, we have a first and a second motion to approve the new hire agenda and all bids except the truck with front end loader. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
The motion passes. Thanks. Thanks for the background.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. I think we're going to get new nameplates out of that.
With our actual
There'll be a lot
of competition. Yeah.
I was thinking of those diplomas we have to sign.
That's a very, very low one.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Further discussion on the truck with front end loader. Julie, you wanted to take this off?
I just have one question, John, about this that I guess I didn't ask. So, would we eventually, what you talked about is doing the high school and the middle school in-house, but would we eventually do all the properties if we buy this thing, or no?
No, we don't have enough. We don't have enough staff. We're not going to increase staff.
Okay.
So The one thing that our facility department does really well is limits overtime.
Yeah.
I checked last year, the whole, not counting custodians, that part only spent $700 up overtime because they shift schedules rather than, and this year they've spent around $700 so far. So 5 years ago, that was $15,000. So the one thing about doing this on your own, some communities and some school districts rack up a lot of overtime. And I just know the way that Mr. Maselli works, that it won't happen that way. It's my thought anyway, so that's the only thing I want to add.
Great to have that flexibility.
And does this provide any opportunities to collaborate with the city?
Well, it will. We actually, this equipment is not just for snow removal. It's very versatile, and we can share it. And there's a lot of that goes on.
Mhm.
We just sold a whole bus that we were going to scrap to the city for their rec program, and they're so thankful. So yes, we'll be able to use it together.
Great. All right, so do I have a motion, or any other questions? I'll take a motion to approve the truck with front-end loader for snow removal and grounds maintenance.
So moved.
Second.
Any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, we will shift back to agenda item 9, ends monitoring progress update.
So, this has kind of come on there, as a desire by the board just to kind of keep updated. And again, we don't have a report for you, but again, we're making what I would say, consistent with what we presented to date on presentations on EQS and transferable skills. Our ends alignment monitoring is alive and well, and Stuart's here. And I don't know if anything else you want to add to.
Well, we really do believe that the truck with front-end loader will continue to build fun along
We
the
want to
way.
know
It's
what
just
ends
really,
that supports.
what we thought, and not to mention, our new engraving business. But, no, I think the key thing to let you know, I mean, we've been working very consistently on this question of proficiency-based graduation requirements, which eventually in the fall will be coming to you as a policy and embedding into both the content and the transferable skills where they fit our ends. We're monitoring that to make sure they're all covered, and whatever's not covered by that, what's missing and where. But we do really feel that with the work that's mostly been done at the high school right now, and we'll eventually be going down with the indicators at all levels, that we'll have a system, because we have to have a system, that says this kid is proficient in this content area, and by working the ends into that, I think we'll finally be getting to what we really need to do. So I really feel that there's been forward momentum that was sometimes hard to concretize, really how to monitor, again, not learning opportunities, which I believe we've always given, you heard it today and you can see it. We give a lot of learning opportunities that are related to the ends, but the question of monitoring the ends, that is, students actually are successful with the ends, was kind of escaping us, and I do think we really do have the tools in place to begin to do that. So we will be, within that, we also, we're working today, Pat Burke and myself, on a model policy out of Maine, where they tied it together, and we have written a letter to the Vermont School Board Association about whether they're working on a model policy, because we don't want to go too far in one direction. Theirs doesn't look the same, and we did get an answer that that's something they'll be working on this summer. And we kind of pushed back and said, well, actually boards really need to start looking at this in the fall. And so it may seem like 220 is a long way away, but really the present 7th grade class, next year's 8th graders, as we've said before, need a course of study that says what it is they need to do to graduate. And therefore boards really are going to need to have this in, August. And so we'd like to work with them, because again, we don't want to, so that's those pieces. So even though model policy on graduation proficiencies doesn't actually sound like, quote, it's the ends, but actually it is the ends. And I think that when we begin to get that work together, I think it'll be very satisfactory to the board and to the community.
Along with that, we have the data system work that's going on, and we've made a lot of progress there around looking at a data system that's going to be able to hold, the information that we would like. So that's kind of
Is
not
the
necessarily
data system
parallel.
work in the form of an RFP, or is it more?
So right now, the HR end of it, which is a little bit different than that. They do have an RFP, and we're using that as a model as we look at the data and the student information piece. Whether one company can do it all or whether it's actually 2 or 3 vendors, we don't know, but we're using that model and looking at all the things from scheduling, and the nitty-gritties to, student dashboard kind of pieces that would allow us to really look and be clear on what each student is doing.
So we're trying. Our current proposal is to try to pull those 2 RFPs together, but not make them exclusively together. We would like to see it go out and see if we could get those connected. And we do know that there are some that will do all, and we think that that's really important as we look at cost benefit analysis. We can triangulate a lot of things which we think are really important for various levels. Obviously most important, classroom instruction, informing decisions, administrators, but all the way up to the school board, or to me, to you, around how we're spending our dollars and what are we getting. So that's where we are. We actually, significant amount of work was going on today in that particular area. So anyway, that's where we are with ends and questions.
Any comments or discussion on ends monitoring progress?
Yeah, a couple questions.
So you're saying that the proficiency-based graduation requirements, that you're going to be essentially doing a crosswalk between the content and transferable skills that are required under the education quality standards?
So under the educational quality standards,
okay.
and we showed you a model of one, but let's just take math, for example. So math says that one of the proficiencies is what they call solve, and then they define what it means to solve problems, and and that's the policy, the proficiency piece, and then there are indicators what that looks like for graduation level of solving. So what does solving have to do with the ends, and so, whether it's, your piece on problem solving that you have an end for, I could look up the various ends, but we look, and there are usually 2 or 3 ends that relate to each of those content areas. Same with science, social studies, reading and writing. Obviously, a number of your ends are related to those pieces, world language. So it's going through all those kind of pieces in terms of content, and then also self-direction, which is one of the transferable skills. Well, the math piece will have, these are one of the focuses areas for transferable skills in math, because there's a lot of self-direction, perseverance, so on, just to name one. And those also relate to our ends. So, basically you have a document that says, when a kid does a performance assessment, the teachers will start to be working on this June, will basically say, this is the content proficiency that this performance assessment assesses, this is the transferable skill that this performance assessment assesses if the student is successful, and at that same time, since it says these are these ends, it would be a piece that would say, yes, so when they did that, here are the ends that are listed, and therefore it does that in the same, and they would have to make sure that was true.
Right, so just I want to remind myself of our conversation of however many meetings back ago. The focus, though, that the folks on the ground, the teachers and the administrators in doing this, they're focusing on the education quality standards and proficiency-based graduation requirements, the content, the transferable skills, the Common Core, etc., to come up with the way to measure that, the indicators, as you call it, and such. That's kind of their focus, and then you are somewhat, or someone kind of on the back end are saying, and that connects up to our ends.
No, but we're having the same conversation with the teachers. At the same time, yeah. So we're wedding them together to say that this is actually where the ends are concretely. So it's not like, so when you heard the teachers today, a year ago we wouldn't have had that kind of conversation, and it's just the beginning. of the teachers looking at the ends and saying, oh, I'm doing this, where are the ends? And so that's part of, as we build the indicators of those proficiencies, and in that policy, piece, and so it's hard to show you because, we hope to show you actually before we give it to you to consider sometime in the summer so you can kind of see a draft. That will spell out the ends as part of that policy within content, transferable skills, the requirements of the state, that the requirements of South Burlington graduation also require that you do the ends. Because that's really what you've said in your ends policy, and so it will be wedded into your proficiency graduation policy. The ends would be right in that policy.
Okay.
I do think we're, until we see that,
right,
it's going to be a difficult conversation. One of the things that I observed with the presentations today was the ends come off a little bit as sort of mom and apple pie when they're presented in the context of a specific learning opportunity.
Right.
So it's pretty clear, each of the educators were saying, they aligned and, I was checking off the boxes and I'll focus on 4 out of
Kind of post.
13. So one of the questions I know I will look for is which specific measurement is going to assess the competency. And there'll certainly be numerous examples as people think about it. But by way of example, would the 5th grade Civil War discussion focus exclusively on teamwork, for instance? I mean, I don't know if that would be an assessment piece necessarily, but would you expect that it would be that specific?
Well, so, again, we haven't really had a lot of looking at the elementary level.
Right.
But I'll take that, for example, so if per se, one of the pieces is about primary sources in our, on our work in social studies in terms of graduation proficiencies. So there's a proficiency around history related to primary sources. And so what does that relate to what ends? It's the use of an understanding of primary source, reading for understanding and audience and point of view. So we'll know what that looks like at a graduation level and eventually at a 5th grade level, and we'll be creating assessments to look to see that the student can understand at their level a primary source, and by doing that, it does reflect on this reading and this writing end. Gotcha. And so when we assess that, we'll be assessing that end at the same time. Because in the end, we have to assess that a student actually does know how to use primary sources in the ways that we've determined.
So they really won't be, there will be a series, and that's the definition of competency, is there's been enough practice that goes on, so it's innate at some point, or demonstrated.
Kind of developmentally progressed.
So, so the high school within a draft format, because of course until the actual proficiencies are passed by the board, we're talking, abstractions, but we're working on pretty hard that we hope there's not a lot of pushback on those. Those indicators of what it means to graduate, the level that you would need to know that proficiency, well, eventually we'll have the middle school indicators and the elementary school indicators. And so at any level, because we're going to be working towards the same pieces, and that's the other thing, there's a true K-12 continuum to get to the math proficiency that we want students to have, even though the content, obviously is a lot more sophisticated for 11th graders than it will be for 3rd or 4th graders. But it's still that question. That's why we're looking at things like solve as a proficiency and then defining that, and then the indicators that means what does it mean to solve or to represent at the elementary versus for an 11th grader to do that, which might, say specifically about pre-calculus functions in the indicators.
So let me I just want one, and you, no fault of yours, you've explained it 2 or 3 times to me over the past year and a half, but I want to make sure. So those proficiencies, are they coming from the Common Core or the education quality standards, or kind of both?
It's kind of both, because the educational quality standards say that these state curriculums, right, which in the case of English language arts, math, and science are the new standards, the Common Core and the next generation science standards. In the case of right now, social studies, the arts, health, those are the Vermont state standards, because those have not been changed or adopted. There are national movements for all those things. There is a Common Core arts curriculum.
They will
There
come
is
eventually.
which will eventually come, but I do think that the state, after like really pushing forward, especially right with the science right on top of the English and the math, kind of, a lot of people push back and said, whoa, we can only absorb so many of those things at a time, especially, again, I've said this a number of times, the elementary teacher who teaches all subject areas. I mean, their learning curve on true change of curriculum between literacy, math, and science alone is massive. So at least they get to stay with the same, grade level expectations for social studies that they've had within the framework that the Common Core also has literacy across the content areas. I mean, so there is some change.
So the so-called transferable skills come as much from the Common Core?
No, the transferable skills the transferable skills as defined in the educational quality standards are there, but all the documents do actually have, in a sense, a transferable skill or an ends. We actually pulled some of them from our ends. There are 7 pieces that the English Language Arts Common Core talks about. Diversity, communication, those things are there. There are the 8 math practice standards like perseverance, problem solving, modeling. So within those standards, besides the content, they did have a bigger framework, the same as what
in the Common Core.
In the Common Core,
right.
And the science has what they call cross-cutting concepts, which are the same thing. So within each of those documents, they're not identical to each other. In fact, you can tell, just like everything else, that one group of people wrote the English. But the idea of the transferable skills of the state, or our ends, is to pull those things together, as models.
And the teachers are learning those
Yes.
Well, they're learning the teaching of those transferable skills that are in the Common Core, and indicators are coming through
that process.
Well, they're in the process of learning. I mean, that's
process
right.
of learning that. Okay.
Learning or not yet learned, for sure.
Right.
We'll go over this again next time.
Well, it's okay. I mean, no, but really, Martin, I mean, it's massive. So if I don't even know if we revised the elementary report card for math to relate to Common Core. There are 8 practice standards in math. We focused on 2 of them, right? Because we're not going to give you 8 things on your report card about the practice standards, but we've decided that the problem solving one and the perseverance one are the ones we want to focus on with kids. But that's not all that's being taught. It's what's, that's partly about what's being reported. And, one of the things that is going to come out of this is how do you report everything to who without getting 50 pages of stuff.
I think that's important to distinguish. It's not it's not inclusive of everything that's being taught.
That's
it's what we're honing in on to measure and to report.
But we also want to have systems, because we will need, even if you get a grade in English still on your report card at the high school, because as Pat said, at this point there are districts that are looking to change the report card. We're not seeing that as the key focus. We do need a record keeping system that says writing, speaking, listening, reading proficiencies, the students made these indicators, which is not the grain size that we've been keeping records of right now, except in a teacher's grade book to some extent, and a difference by teacher, as opposed to would be the same across an area, right? You don't get to choose your indicators anymore,
Thank you, Stuart.
Right. We're making incremental progress on my understanding.
That's right. Want to talk about the bucket load?
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 10, report on school safety and campus security.
So I don't have a handout for you, just information. Last month we had our public safety information session. This involves police, fire, and our school representatives, and we do that twice annually, and again, just talking about how we're doing as a district and responding potentially, or being prepared to respond. We This time we did actually a scenario that happened in Florida and kind of witnessed and watched how our group would respond. There are always things going on. As you know, there's enough things going on in our societies around us, around different things happening. So we're always adjusting and looking at things. I feel like we're in really good shape presently around the systems that we have and the things that the community are supporting, from access into our buildings. It is very, very sensitive in many ways around, particularly at the high school and the community library, where it's, and again, I indicated earlier that at the visioning meeting for public library is to make it open and free to everyone, and we're working hard to make that interface, able to work for them and their mission, but also under our mission, there's those really big issues. So I think we've done a good job around having some inside security, but it's been at a cost. And it's also still what I would say downgrades our level of, safety slightly. Again, things are in place. It's my recommendation not to go into extreme measures around practicing, mock situations to the highest degree where you actually, make the school go through a whole bunch of additional steps. By law, they're mandated to do 10 evacuations. Those are fire, what we always once knew as, fire evacuation. And you can infuse other now crises in those within the 10, up to, I think, 3 of those you can do. So anyway, I never want to say we've got it all figured out. We are really fortunate also to have police and fire with us. The fire folks were part of all of our crisis meetings this last round go round, where they provided really great information on things that were really pertinent to student and staff safety. So, John?
There's a cultural, I think it's a cultural thing with athletics that's going on. Our facility scheduler really is under fire a lot of times, because in the old days you read about kids who were gym rats and they snuck in the gym, or parent coaches who are pretty gung-ho, and we have a little conflict with that. You may hear about that sometimes, but it's because of our access to the schools needs to be controlled. We need to know who's in there at all times, and so that's a little bit of the learning on how to keep our schools safe. That if you go back 15 years, we would just call the gym teacher and say, "Can we use the Colchester Middle School gym for AAU?" "Sure, come on in," and close the door on the way out. But that can't happen anymore. So,
the other part, John brings up a good point. This is part of our ongoing crisis conversations around. We pretty much know when our school day's ongoing. We're pretty controlled. Doors are locked. They're buzzed in. But we have these peripheral times of the year. John alluded to one, after hours or weekends, and then we have all of our evening events, right? Sporting, co-curricular events, and large numbers of people. And how do we respond and control that? So that's entering into the conversation now with Ed Hockenberry around coming up with additional protocols and procedures, how we announce, how we visibly announce and inform, what do coaches need to be learning, so it's a whole other layer, I think, as John kind of points out, to the weekend scenario. And actually Friday I walk around with facilities and custodial and athletics on the high school campus, and just part of that is looking at, facility upkeep, and wants and needs, but it's also about safety and security as well. So I don't know if there's any questions in that area.
All right, seeing none, thanks for the update. We'll move on to agenda item 11 and start with 2.7.
So 2.7, I know we had a couple board members that were going to go over that initially, and I know schedules have been tight, and that has not happened. So I think the recommendation, in talking with Elizabeth briefly, would be that you kind of go through this, spend some time. We're going to take off 2.1, and you kind of work through the policy this way, and if there is still a desire for the subcommittee to look at more closely, that would be fine, or maybe you want to call a certain amount of time you work on it, either one, I'm not sure.
Yeah, do you want to, let me just kind of get the pleasure of the board. Do you want to just kind of go through the changes in this policy and maybe spend the next 10 minutes seeing how far we get with that?
Does
Any
everyone
preferences?
have, like, specific questions about it? You do, probably. I do. I do too. I'm just saying.
Or we could go that route of specific questions, because I think everybody's had one chance to look through it. But there were a number of areas that changed, but it's the body of the document is really like 10 pages. So.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would say I had a couple of questions. I got my questions in late, so they're in the package. I just left them on the table to give it to you.
So why don't we do that then? Why don't we spend 10 minutes on questions and see how far we get with this first go round?
Want to go through a detailed policy order?
We can do that. All right, so we'll start with detail policy 1. And I think because we're doing this in a committee, I'll go ahead and read that. This is that the superintendent shall not fail to insure against theft and casualty losses to at least 80% of replacement value and against liability losses to board members, staff, and the organization itself in an amount greater than the average for comparable organizations. So Patrick?
I do not have any questions.
In other words, we have to have insurance, and we have insurance.
Yeah.
And I think that's documented. Any comments, John? Did you want to make any specific comments on detail policy 1?
2, the VISBIT insurance, they list all the districts and the amount of coverage that we have and say, okay, these districts have the same amount of coverage. And that's new, wasn't in anything we've shown you before. Second thing is VISBIT is very cognizant of what we talk about. We meet with them twice a year as the Northwest Region school districts, and the big picture program coverage that they've had, that's because we asked for that. That's all for all internships. And they're also looking abreast, keeping abreast in the area of our athletic field turf safety with lead and the particles that they're very concerned about that, and they'll work with us. So it's just a couple things, but
Where's their lead?
No, there's been recent media or past media releases around,
lead and turf.
Well, they're rubber pellets, and then the contaminants and concerns and questions about that.
Shredded tires.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tires have interesting ingredients in them.
Yeah, but to be clear, all of the tests, all of the chemical analysis have come back that have proven not to be a concern. Now, obviously, we're not saying to ingest, right? But this is as a playing field in the condition that it is. But again, John's point around VISBIT and being knowledgeable about our turf field or other turf fields is
as we replace it soon, we have to be really on top of that to know what the ingredients are in there.
Okay. So unless there's any other questions on detail policy 1, we'll move on to number 2, which is the superintendent, I'm just going to preface that, not allow unbonded personnel access to material amounts of funds. Any specific questions on detail policy 2?
My only question was whether credit cards should be listed there. David has responded to that question.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to detail policy.
Is that?
Yep.
Detail policy 3, subject facilities and equipment to improper wear and tear or insufficient maintenance.
I just have a question on the evidence, and it's really only because I'm curious. So what happens with the computers now that we're in the first year where they've lived their life for seniors, right?
Right.
So what are you going to do with those?
About 90%. I'm looking at Stuart because they're 90% we're going to resell. We're going out to bid to resell them so that they're gone.
Okay.
And we are talking we're talking about how many we could save as backups. And I know there's been some good discussion about that.
Backups, in terms of when kids have pushed in their computers, for repair or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And also, just in terms of one little program, Mr. LaPointe still does Let It Go Robotics, and he's gonna end up with about 8 of them, just for that purpose, because you can't use a Chromebook, for example, to do Lego robotics. And,
Right. Okay.
Good. All right, we'll move on to detail policy 4, unnecessarily expose the organization, its board, or its staff to claims of liability.
So I have a question about that. So if we're trending toward the negative, which is what you say here on the top of page 5,
Right.
what are we doing to decrease the number of workman's comp complaints or claims?
What's happened is, it's all in comparison to other districts in the pool. And over time, we've had some, I would say 4 very, very significant claims. One started 8 years ago, and the liability there is about $400,000. So that is cumulative. 2 summers ago, we had, it just was a trend where 6 or 7, I think 7 custodians were injured, either standing on chairs like that, and so we had VISPA come in and do safety courses. So it's a matter of managing the workers' comp claim, the big ones, and then keeping the training going to keep the claims that we do have small. I know with Karen, with having an HR director, has really helped, because she knows the laws, and she's been able to keep us on track with those, with workers' comp better than we had. But yes, we're trending negative because of claims compared to the rest of the pool.
Okay.
Under the safety inspections, I just was struggling to understand that first sentence. The district also requests safety inspections in key areas where risks of liability are deemed to be analyzed.
Deemed to be analyzed, okay.
Should say need to be analyzed, doesn't it?
Is that all, which is a
Yeah.
typo? Is that all? I just want to make sure I didn't misunderstand that.
Yeah, that should be needed, I guess.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. I always assume I'm just missing something important.
We put a few examples in there of the playgrounds, the middle school, and also our recent review of transportation, because it's operations, but it's also safety. And there's a lot of work to be done. But our next safety inspection, just so you know, is the high school, and that's going to be big. So.
All right, we'll move on to detail policy 5. Make any purchase wherein normally prudent protection has not been given against conflict of interest of over $15,000 without having obtained comparative prices and quality, of over $75,000 without a stringent method of ensuring the balance of long-term quality and cost, and orders shall not be split to avoid these criteria. Questions or comments?
The only nit comment I would have is on the plan to come into compliance. It says that the training will be uploaded to our platform by June 30, so it's ready for FY16, but it doesn't say when the training will actually be conducted.
So one of the things with Safe Schools, it's an online process. So based on job description and essential functions of the job, we upload what you in that position need, whether it's bloodborne pathogens, first aid, etc.
Right.
And then it pushes out to the employee that's needing it, and they're given a certain period of time to complete it. That does not mean that we won't do some things orally as well through new staff orientation, but because there's such fluid movement of staff, this is where we've been not in a good place. So this particular need obviously will hit with higher level employees who may have controls into funds and decisions like that. So
not to put too fine a point on it, would we expect that people would be trained before the end of fiscal year 2016?
Well,
Or
they
at
would
some
be-
point
Yeah.
within 2016?
They would be trained at the beginning when they, either if it's
Right.
a,
That's
so
what I
if it's
So
a
the
teacher
compli-
leader, they would be trained when
Yeah.
they come back, or if it's an
Right.
ongoing staff.
So,
Thank
so to Patrick's comment or question, maybe the better
Way.
language on coming into compliance is sort of documenting when training would be completed
Okay.
versus when the,
Yeah, this.
the training is available. Okay. All right, we've got about, what's the board's pleasure? We've got about 2 minutes left on our 10, and we've got 6, 7, well, we've got through 10, so we could hold the balance or keep going on this? What's your preference?
I'm fine with keep going.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Okay, so detail policy 6, fail to protect intellectual property information and files from loss or significant damage.
So I have a question about these passwords at the end, and the security information on page 7. It says the student passwords are reset to their birthdays at the beginning of each year. That sounds convenient. But are they, I mean, I have a suspicion that students know each other's birthdays. And if that's the criteria, that there's a security risk there. So are they encouraged to immediately change them
Yeah.
to something
Yeah,
else?
that's the whole point. The reason they revert is because they weren't at their birthdays, but they would, if they didn't revert, then their passwords would have expired and they couldn't get into their accounts at the beginning of each year. So when they sit down the first time at a computer, when they come in, because we have actually had teachers, the same thing, if that 120 days,
Passes.
School board members.
yeah, you know, because you went on summer vacation and you didn't change it right before you left, then we're working to open those up. Doing it for just the teachers is one thing, doing it for every student
It's not
would
just
be something else.
school board
So
members, it's also administrators,
No.
superintendents.
everybody has had this happen.
But-
Anyway, so that's what it is. We encourage all students to immediately change their passwords the first time they open, but that's the protocol that we have so that we don't have to go to, 1,000 students and reopen their accounts for them.
To Dan's point, and your caution, I think, Dan, is that if somebody, wanted to get onto mine, knew my birthday, could get on and disrupt, is possible. Although, because we do them right off in the beginning of the year, if somebody, then you say, I can't get in, because my friend changed and got in, then obviously we would reset and quickly allow them to change
Well,
it.
I'm wondering if the sentence even needs to be there.
It's kind of a procedure, yeah. Yeah. Yep, that's a good point. Kind of what we've gotten into this before with telling too much.
And it just, and we said a couple times, we encourage it, we don't require it. The system doesn't force
Yeah,
it.
you can leave your, we all know, you can leave your password as
I mean,
change me
on the
or
first use.
whatever.
Well, yes,
No,
you
no, you
could,
just published that, so
but actually,
Elizabeth's gonna
if your
have to
password
change
was your birthday, it would expire.
And you can't keep it.
In other words, you couldn't keep it all year as your birthday
No,
because
but it would be that, it could be that way for
But you could be
120
that
days.
way for the
Yeah.
first 90 days or whatever.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the suggestion is that we don't really need the language in there.
Yeah,
And
Yeah, we'll take that off.
and I I think I've identified a flaw in the system with my own account.
Is that right?
Yes.
You're gonna let us know for security reasons?
I cannot say it right now because I'd put the whole system in jeopardy, but I will let someone in
know?
authority know.
Yes.
The only other question I would have, and again, this is one where I asked a question that's in the document, so I won't re-ask that one, but are the is the backup system, now we're not backing up the tape anymore, we're backing up to another server, correct?
Right.
Is that backup server, are those hard drives encrypted on that backup server? Or is that unencrypted?
I would
You
have
only
to
get one
find that
email.
out. I
That's
believe they're
very-
encrypted, but I
doesn't
can't
tell you
tell
now.
you that for sure.
Yeah. That's a new change. It's a pain in
And
the
that
neck.
second server is sufficiently isolated from the other server that it's not both in jeopardy for the same bad event?
Yeah, so redundancy is in place, yes.
It's in a different building.
That's right.
Yeah, physically.
Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah.
Not sitting right next
So
to
data
it.
security.
So the one fire gets both of them.
Yep.
No.
Not using the cloud?
Well, I mean, there are
There are
some
some
things that
things.
we have that are on the cloud, but it's not the only place that we back up. We have Especially for business and record purposes, a lot of our stuff is in Microsoft, so the cloud's not the only place where that needs to be.
John?
The board questions that came in today specifically talked about this 2.7 detail policy. So would you expect that would be incorporated in the report? These it talked about physical security, firewall, data destruction.
So part of this may be in my background is higher in the technology side of the end, so
Sure.
my questions were more focused on that, so I would defer to some of the board on whether they want this much detail in the policy. I mean, there is a little bit of the more you put about your security in public documents, the more you're putting yourself in a
Exactly.
position of jeopardy, so you've got to be thoughtful about that.
Right.
I mean, we could do a security kind of report that may not be in your monitoring report. I don't like to volunteer to make one-off kind of reports, you know that. But we do a lot of work around this. I mean, you know, our IT staff is very sensitive to the issues of firewall. We've worked on that every year to strengthen. You know, I really feel like we have one of the best systems
Yeah,
around, but I
think
can't give you the
Well, and
specifics of it because other people do
But I
that
think
actual work.
to Pat's point is, you know, how explicit, you know, should we be getting here? This may be a place where, you know, kind of like a direct inspection would be best, and would allow for more, you know, a specific look for the board as opposed to more publicly discussed safety and security.
Sure, give them a tour
Remember,
of
we
that.
went in, we've gone down this road in like security video, you know, and how long and how does that, et cetera, back up. And so not doing that in public session was good, but only informing the board.
I think as far as the details of this, it may be fruitful to put a little bit of a general statement about the technology security posture and that without specifics, just so that it's addressed and it's not kind of vacant from the answer. But I wouldn't put the details in that you provided in the response to the board.
I think we got you, so we can come back and pull out some of those.
So we have some additional language there. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Detail policy 7, receive, process, or disperse funds under controls that are insufficient to meet the board-appointed auditor standards.
I just think that with the, I guess this is the plan to come into compliance underneath where it says I report policy violation. And we've talked about the fact that we need a date on there about when we'll be potentially in compliance at least, or a target date, and that seems to be missing from this.
So can we add that, just a target date or some kind of schedule? I don't know how you want to address that, but there's enough follow-up items that I think we can cover that. Any other comments on detail 7?
Just as a question, John, did the auditor get approved on Monday?
You know, I don't know. I believe they did. But yes.
Monday night. Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't.
Forgot to ask Paul.
All right, detail policy 8, oh, sorry, another, yes, sorry.
There's one real, it's new on page 8. The financial management questionnaire is a state law that David has to certify this. And 2 months within 2 months, the board has to sign off on it. It's a checklist that goes through things we've done in our audit, but it's our business manager group emphasized that this is a state law that has to be done now and through the state auditor's office. So it's here as evidence for this monitoring report, but it'll come to you probably next meeting from David for you to look at it.
That's Exhibit 6, John?
Yeah, it's Exhibit 6, yes.
Yep.
That's why that's there.
Got it.
It's new to us.
Can I ask a question with respect to that? A little not topic. It's how are we to do our due diligence on that list?
Well, it kind of puts the onus on the administration we are certifying to the board, and of course it's always the superintendent, that these things, this is the state of affairs, so it would be pretty hard, I mean, to verify it.
Policy
I do
governance,
believe
we defer to you guys with them.
Yeah, and even the signature unless it says we reviewed it, doesn't say we verified it.
Yeah.
I guess we review it and we ask questions about the ones that don't seem right. Okay.
Okay. Detail policy 8, compromise the independence of the board's audit or other external monitoring or advice, such as by engaging parties already chosen by the board as consultants or advisors. No questions, comments? All right.
So the city council has approved a new person, so if we're gonna be approving this next meeting.
We don't have to, do we have to approve it? It's their decision.
No, it's their decision, but
we can
it would be
update
an
the
update
policy.
in the policy.
By the way,
ordinance, 'cause right now
it'll
it
still be
doesn't-
the same firm, it's just, we'll say that they've been selected
Right,
for
right.
3 more years, right?
That was a recommendation.
If that's confirmed.
Yeah.
Committee's recommendation.
Yeah, if we're coming back this next time, then we should have that.
Right, if it's a change, yeah.
Okay. So detail 9, investor hold operating capital in insecure instruments, including uninsured checking accounts and bonds of less than AA rating at any time, or in non-interest-bearing accounts, except where necessary to facilitate ease in operational transactions.
So I did have a question, is that $128,592, is that to facilitate the ease in operational transactions? That's why that's not, that's uncollateralized?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could put that in there.
Okay.
That's why that's not collateralized.
Ease in operational, I got it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And number 10, endanger the organization's public image, its credibility, or its ability to accomplish ends. Any questions? All right, and I think lastly, 11, change the organization's name or substantially alter its identity in the community. I'm seeing no questions. All right, I think we have several areas of comment, so we'll review this again.
And should we have the subcommittee meeting?
I don't know if we need to.
I don't think we need to.
No.
Okay.
I don't think we need to.
And thank you, John. John, a lot of hard work into this thing as usual, pulling this stuff together with his staff.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you. And if I can make a recommendation on 3.2, we're kind of in the process of the superintendent's performance evaluation. So what I'd like to suggest is that I put together kind of a document along with what the superintendent has already provided on self-assessment, so that at our next executive session we can review that and take a chunk of time. We may have to modify the time a little bit to accommodate that, and then I think we'll be within the time frame we've allocated for ourselves. So why don't we do that? Good. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 12, consider the 2015-16 school board meeting schedule.
It's in your packet.
Do you know them now, or do you want to?
I think I do know them now. I'm not gonna be around from July 8th or the August 5th, so hopefully we can at least move, wait, actually, just a second, I might be around.
Any other conflicts that individual?
I will not be available August 5th.
So no.
And nor will I.
Okay.
So,
Any other known conflicts?
November 18th, I'll probably be here.
Okay.
I always miss that.
So perhaps we could take a look at the 5th of August and look at modifying that one?
Mm-hmm.
Could we possibly modify July 8th, since it's the only one in July? I mean, that one seems to be
Yeah.
one that's kind of a little more
Flexible?
flexible.
The only thing I think we should talk about is that, you know, if we do have hires or retirements and fills,
Mhm.
then we may need maybe we could talk about just a shorter meeting then
Mhm.
to do that.
Okay.
I don't know, we have to look at the calendar too.
Why don't we keep that one on for now? We can
Mhm.
look at possibly a shorter one if you've got a need. And it looks like August 5th, there's enough
That we gotta
that we
move,
could look
yeah.
at that one.
I could do it if it was July 9th, which is a Thursday.
We are trying to keep them on Wednesday.
But it's not that's
Yep.
that's the second Wednesday, it's not the first
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Could be.
As we're talking about the August one, moving it.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about now when you want to move it to, look at calendars, or do you want to just say we're going to look at moving it and then talk about it later?
We probably look at just moving it, but if you know a block of time right now, Patrick, it's probably good to know that before we.
The Wednesday before that, I will not be available either.
I'm not available the Wednesday after that. So.
Okay.
It's like-
That one may be a non-Wednesday.
Yeah.
You'll have to choose which one.
Well, these are conflicts, and what we'll do,
Yeah.
Delina, we can send out, you know, that this is a conflict, and we'll give
Yeah.
a couple choices.
Yeah.
And if we can forego a meeting, you know, that's easy to say, but, you know.
Well,
we
and
also know-
sometimes we adjust the agenda
That's
to,
right.
to kind of
Accommodate,
look
yeah.
at having a consensus or a majority of the board there. Okay.
So just one other quick question. I mean, as far as timing with the master planning task force and such, are we going to be needing an extra meeting in July possibly? Or will we cross that bridge when we get there?
I think you'll cross it when you get there. I think you need to get to the June
Mhm.
receiving option, and then that will determine maybe
Okay.
if there are extra steps or not.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to the 2000, agenda item 13, the 2015-16 yearly agenda work plan.
So we made the adjustments from the last meeting. You see, ends monitoring was one that we put now every other month.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think this is, so we just were talking about the July board meeting, and you see on there we've got, you know, job descriptions. So you're probably right, we're not too heavy there. August starts to get, you know, you start to see how it conflicts with the work we gotta get done. It's always hard to look at this and think about all the
Think
activity
ahead,
that goes
yeah.
on in a month, but.
I guess just starting with the ends policy, I mean, I think the conversation even today suggests it's gonna be hard to, for instance, separate out the proficiency-based graduation requirements from the Common Core, from the EQS, but maybe that's just kind of a focus.
Yeah,
or
in other words, really focus parts of the report about the different aspects
Okay.
thereof, instead of just trying to cover everything at all.
I think also to the community, it's really hard when you know, we're doing this, and Stuart's compacting it for you to say, oh, this is interrelated to this, but we're gonna talk about PBGRs, then that, I think it will help the board gain, and the community gain more focused information.
You know what might be
Right.
helpful too is if we look back, we've typically had to schedule probably 2 what we refer to
Retreats.
as retreats.
Yep.
I wonder
Work
if
sessions.
we shouldn't look back historically and see if there's a trend in those based on time of year
Mhm.
and just anticipate building a couple of those into the schedule.
They are in there.
Where are the,
Yeah,
did I miss
they're
them?
in there
Yeah.
in August and then again
In
in
April.
April, and that's typically those are.
They're 3
Oh, it
hours,
is, right
but
here,
I don't,
okay.
and in April, but I don't know
I missed it.
if that's, you think it's better than we've had in the past. Just means we have to have a special, I mean, it doesn't really articulate it that way, because we have our double blocks, but.
Well, if they're built in,
Yeah,
that's fine.
that was feedback that we put
That was
on
good.
here from
Okay.
a few meetings ago.
We didn't call it a retreat. That confused me.
Work session, yeah. Well, I think it wasn't really, Denver really felt like a retreat, you know?
All right, any other comments on the work agenda? Do you need action on this, David?
Nope.
All right, we'll set the agenda for the May 20th meeting next.
I would just offer that I've got a conflict, at least for the 7 to 8 hour, my daughter's concert, that I will not be there.
Nice.
Here, I should say.
And I might be doing the same. So if you can, check it over and write it down because of all my questions.
So the 20th.
It's my 36th wedding anniversary.
She comes to a concert to celebrate.
Right.
I'm sure that's what I was thinking.
I know a guy.
So what did we add from here, from last meeting?
I'm missing the agenda here. So shall we just adjust the agenda maybe,
Yeah, I think
David?
so. So executive session, we could move everything up, start a little bit later and try to shorten up. So you wouldn't be able to get there until,
We still have a quorum without them.
Right.
oh, was it more than two? No, just two of you.
Just two.
I think we should try to do it.
Yeah,
Well,
so-
we can, I'm just suggesting maybe we move the topic such that those that we'd want a quorum of the board to discuss.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not to diminish the value of 3 board members,
No,
but
I know, but.
So how would you like to go about doing that? What would be,
are there kind of mission critical items that anyone who cannot be in attendance the first hour would like to move to after you're available?
So when you say the first hour, you're talking about the first hour with the public?
Well, what's the period of time you're
7 to
not,
8, you said, right?
you're not available 7 to 8, right?
Would you make the executive session?
And I'm not, I'm gonna leave the concert after my daughter has sang, and so that might be
Okay.
earlier. And I don't know if Patrick, you're planning.
What grade is your daughter again?
She's in 7th. So, I don't know. But I would say the treatment of parents and guardians, I definitely want to.
Yeah, I think the later stuff is, the most important stuff is later anyway.
Yeah, and the
Right.
tuition
Okay.
student, well, and monitoring.
This is gonna
Because I have more
be
questions.
in the middle school, our meetings,
Yep.
and the concerts at the middle school, so I can be there for the 6 to 7.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
just
we don't
switch it.
lose executive session, and we'll just keep the agenda the way it is, and it looks like, if nothing else, you know, Martin, if you haven't shown up for 2.1, we'll just defer that.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Nice.
Concert, I think, is at the high school, unless you know specifically, but you
That's
just
right
have to,
across.
you'll just have to run, that's all.
It's right across.
Yeah, you're right, it is.
I don't-
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
They never stand in
There's
time.
only 12 things on my calendar.
I know, Pat. I don't want you to miss that.
All right, and we'll move on to agenda item 15, future agenda items.
Well, I wonder about the conversation that we had with Paul.
Mm-hmm.
If there's some, and maybe we're gonna get some additional feedback, but I don't, that seems to be an area that we probably need to be paying attention to.
Yeah,
But maybe that-
I think we should put that on there until we have our June 3rd discussion.
Well, yeah, what I was gonna suggest is that's something David and I can follow up in
Yep.
our meetings with Pat and
Yep.
Kevin.
Yeah.
And then I think that's accurate, Julie. There's nothing really to respond to right now, so.
Just kind of keeping it on the
So
radar.
we'll keep it in the city school conversations at that different level. Okay.
And I just, not that we're wrong, I'll just offer that I'm, the first June meeting, I'm out of town that week for business.
Okay.
I might let it talk.
Okay. One quick note I made to myself on future agenda items, and I specifically just put down Ed Hockenberry's name, but it was really as much as he's been in the role for how long now?
Coming up on it, coming up on a year.
That's what I thought, it was about a year, so it might be good to get a topic on there, just an update on athletics and
Activity.
co-curricular
Sure.
at some point.
Just so we'll add that to a future agenda item, and we'll figure out when that will
Mhm.
be, yeah.
Anything else on future agenda items? All right, agenda item 16, the minutes of the April 15th meeting. Any changes or comments? All right, by consensus, those are approved. And agenda item 17, consider maximum expenditures on high school elevator project.
You know that, I didn't even see that for this now.
Don't need
On
that.
Tuesday, we get data from the construction manager.
Yeah.
So that, we should transfer that to the next meeting.
We reserved it here. We weren't sure.
Okay, sorry
That's all.
about that. I
Yeah.
didn't-
It's
All right, so we'll move that to the May 20th.
Mhm.
All right. Any questions or comments that have not been answered on agenda item 19, AP orders 38, 39, and 40? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the board's self-evaluation. If we can just take a couple minutes and pass these on to Martin.
Can I make a comment while we're doing that, David? So, one thing I've heard a little bit about this week from parents is that there's been parent-teachers conferences, the schedule is up, but there was no notice to parents that that was up, like it's on the website.
Pick a time, you mean?
Yeah, but nothing went out to say this is available to you, so,
Mhm.
I just think it's something we need to address.
Usually there's, communication that goes out, so I'm going to find out what.
Yeah.
It's the high school that would be talking about,
Yeah.
it's the other parent conferences.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's the pick a time.
Yeah.
Those have typically been gone out a good couple weeks ahead of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I don't think we need executive session unless you want to come back and talk more about. I got through all my things.
Let me just ask. That one.
Really? Really? Is that right?
Stuart, you're invited to fill out an evaluation form.
Okay.
That's for you, Corey.
So, very easy tonight. The main thing is that we all appreciated the students being here and showing us how the ends are working. So, other than that, nothing.
Good. And David and I were just discussing, we don't believe we have a need for an executive session unless anyone has anything they wanted to further discuss in executive session. So I'll.
Yeah, specific.
We're going to have a brief one just to wrap up from we needed it.
Well, we
All right.
rushed you. We rushed you towards the end there. So.
All right. Seeing nothing, no interest there, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Are we signing?
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.